I'm going to go ahead and just get started to honor your time here and those of our guest speakers today. So today we have two great speakers. We have Kim joining us from Adams 12 and Hollie from Academy 20. And we are really excited to have these two ladies join us and share what they're doing at the districts and some unique ways that they're using Tableau. As a reminder, we have that chat feature in Zoom. We are using chat today to kind of add color commentary, make connections with team members. If you do have a question for Kim or Hollie, I ask that you put it in the Q&A option within Zoom. I will help moderate those questions. If for some reason we don't get to that question, we will follow up post session. And let me go ahead and switch to the next slide. I'm Stephanie Henry. Most of you know who I am. I'll just go ahead and run through this really quick. Manager with Plant Moran, been with the firm for 3.5 years. Prior to that, spent my life at Cherry Creek School District for almost 16. I'm passionate about using data analytics in the K12 and education system, which is why I've been fortunate at the firm to still continue leading and facilitating these groups. My role within this is just to be there to support you, to facilitate conversations, to let you have connections with your peers, to really use data to support decisions within the schools. Claire, my partner in crime, she is out on leave, but will be joining us for our next session, but I do want to keep her in there and honor her time with us. So I'm going to just kind of quickly switch over to Kim. I'm going to stop presenting, hand over the reins. And again, if you have questions for Kim throughout the session, please put those in the Q&A portion and I will help facilitate those.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kim Bennett. Let me share my screen here. Okay. So hopefully everyone can see my slideshow. I'm a research and data analysis coordinator with Adams 12 5-star schools in Thornton. I'm going to talk to you today about the English Language Learner Summary Tableau workbook that I've created for not only our district staff, but also for our school administrators. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview about Adams 12 5-star schools. We serve about 38,000 students. Obviously that has dropped over the pandemic, but these are the 1920 October count numbers that we have. We also serve approximately 7,000 English language learners, and that includes NEP, Monetary Year 1 and Year 2. And our English language learners speak approximately amongst themselves 97 different languages and come from 55 countries outside of the US. We also serve about 650 newcomer students. So we even have our own high school that's dedicated solely to serving newcomer students, as well as newcomer classroom assistants at some of our elementary schools. So our challenge is to really provide quality English language learner services that is data-driven. Our EL director really wanted to use data to inform district as well as school decisions and best serve our EL population. She wanted to have schools to have access to their own data in a more interactive environment where we could add and update throughout each school year. And so I originally created an EL summary Tableau workbook that was created for the district staff, both our EL coordinator as well as our EL director. And it included data from all of our multiple schools. And this workbook was really well received. We thought it was a great way to be able to show district staff what our EL department was working on and what our numbers were, but there's still really no way for the schools to have access to their own data in this kind of interactive environment. We have some Infinite Campus reports that show aggregate access data as well as EL data, but there's really no one-stop shop where school administrators could view their English language learner data. So that was kind of our challenge at first. And most larger school districts purchase Tableau server. This allows districts to share their data in a very controlled environment. It allows them to create one workbook for the schools and then turn off and turn on permissions so that each school only sees their own school's data. Unfortunately, our school district has decided not to purchase Tableau server, which kind of presents a problem with disseminating data readily and safely to schools. So our real challenge and our problem was, how are we going to get this data to schools while making sure that privacy is protected and without making a separate workbook for each school, because that seems like a nightmare to me. So we came up with a solution that's not perfect in any way, shape, or form, but it works for now temporarily. We basically created a Tableau workbook whose tabs are password protected. So each school has their own password. They're only allowed to see their own data, and that password will change each school year as staff changes. So obviously principals move around each school year, so we can change passwords, we can remove administrators from those lists so they're not receiving the data if they've changed schools or moved out of our district. So over time, we have added and modified different views to this workbook that helps ensure that the data is presented in a meaningful way, it stays meaningful, and it's helpful for data-driven decision-making skills. Hasn't really been a smooth road. It's a lot of work, and there's a steep learning curve because we basically have every person who needs to view this workbook needs to download Tableau Reader onto their Macs or PCs. So that's definitely a steep learning curve to get that downloaded, to get that working, and to get administrators access and have them learn kind of how to use that. So there are definite pros and cons to this. Obviously, the pro is we get the data to the school administrators. They can view their EL data. They can only view their own EL data, and it helps them make better decisions about how to serve their EL population. It also reduces the amount of individual roster requests. So as a data analyst, I get a lot of requests for, hey, I need this roster, I need this roster. So it really does help reduce that load because all the schools can basically go in and the administrators can see their roster for their current EL students. And it's also a one-stop shop. So you don't have to go into IC and run certain reports or view this Tableau workbook and then go in and ask for more data. So it really is one place where they can view all of their data, both testing and rosters, to really help them make decisions. It helps schools with redesignation. So at the end of the school year, because the assessment data is made available to them. So it really helps them kind of hear their redesignations using this data. And it helps scheduling and training within the EL department. I know that oftentimes the EL department uses the Tableau workbook to show their administrators what they can find there, what they can view there, and how to work with that data during their EL trainings that our district provides. And we also plan on using it this year for FTE planning. So we're planning on adding a piece to that that will allow administrators to really see where their FTE is and how to plan that and how to maximize that. And granted, there are a lot of pros, but there are definite cons. So data privacy is our biggest caution. So don't just go out and do this without thinking this through. We're basically relying on staff to follow ethical practices by not downloading the full version of Tableau Desktop on their computers, removing that password, and viewing everyone's data. Tableau Desktop, granted, we basically have limited Tableau Desktop to be only downloaded on both myself and my coworkers' computers, so they're not able to download the full version. It is restricted and we don't pay for licenses for people, but you can download the free version, the 14-day trial, and do the same thing. So it is not foolproof. So definitely use caution. Don't think that this is like the best thing from sliced bread. There are definite cautions when using this and doing this. And honestly, the maintenance of the workbook. So I have 2 workbooks now that I keep for the EL department. One is for the district staff who can view basically everybody's data. And then there's the one that's password protected for the schools to view. And it's a lot of work to update those monthly and disseminate it to all the EL administrators within our schools. So it is very time consuming. So please keep that in mind as well. And we get lots of Tableau reader questions. Even though we have cheat sheets out there on how to download Tableau reader and how to use it, it still is a huge learning curve for administrators. So keep that in mind when thinking about doing this. So I'm going to do a walkthrough. Switch over here. Okay, so here's kind of a walkthrough of the EL summary Tableau workbook as administrators would see it through Tableau Reader. So it starts off with this landing page here. We have different tabs for the different items that they can view. So we have current EL roster, access achievement scores, access growth on track, historical enrollment for ELs, languages. We have information on newcomers and long-term ELs and parent waivers. We have special programs, so students on IEPs, students who are gifted and talented, and then attendance. And again, these alter and change depending on what we want to present each year and may be added and changed throughout the year as well. So the first tab is the current EL roster. As you can see, there is no data presented. That is because up here at the top, this is where an administrator would enter their password to view. And they won't be able to view any data until they do this. So let me get the password here that I have. All right. So I just copy and paste the password because it's the easiest. So this is fake data. It's not actual data that we present. But this is an example of, say, I'm a Federal Heights elementary administrator. I enter my password, click enter, and there's my roster of students. Again, it shows, all of their data. It includes if they're a newcomer, a long-term ELL. It includes their access scores, their other testing scores, and you can also filter here. So if there's specific things you want to see, you can always filter by those as well. Then we move on to the Access Achievement tab. And for this one, it is not password protected because it's all aggregate data that's available on the CE website. It's basically broken down by performance level. And this allows them to kind of just get an aggregate data of all of their information. So this is district-wide, and then you can go district by grade, district by level, school, and school by grade. And again, you can select a domain as well if you want your overall or just focus on literacy. And then you can select a specific school. So with aggregate data, since that's presented anyway on the CD website, we allow all administrators to be able to view that. And then we move over here to access growth, same thing. We have the same drop downs that we had before. We can also break them down by certain groups. But again, this is all data that's available on the CD website, so we don't password protect these ones. So it does help to have ones that are not password protected and some that are. That way, we don't have to put passwords on every single one if we don't want to, but you're welcome to, but you can do either way. We also do access growth on track, both overall and by proficiency level. And then there's kind of just a little cheat sheet on what that looks like, because growth on track is a little more difficult of a concept to understand in terms of implementing that with students. And then here we have another password protected tab. This is historical enrollment for ELLs. I'm going to copy and paste Federal Heights in there. So as you can see, once I copy and pasted it and clicked enter, so this shows kind of total enrolled English language learners for all of the different school years historically, as well as a current count. And since I update this workbook monthly, that current count will change each month depending on what the enrollment looks like. And same with English language proficiency. So down here, again, it's historical all the way till current count. And then we have a tab for just languages, because this is a pretty typical data request for teachers and administrators. So they really want to know what their top language backgrounds are, what their top correspondence languages are. And here is a password protected. So basically have the newcomers, long-term ELs, and those students on a parent waiver. It's both historical and current, although it won't be, if you don't have any newcomers, it won't show it with a current. So for example, there are no long-term ELs currently at Federal Heights, except for an example. Then we have special programs, so students on an IEP and gifted and talented ELs. And again, it's broken down by primary disability and general intellect and talent pool for the gifted and talented. And it includes historical as well as current. And then the last view is attendance. So attendance is basically average attendance rate. Historical is based on end of year, and then current is based on currently. So the current one will update each month as well. All right, let's get back to, okay. So in order to create a password protected workbook, I'm going to show you kind of what you need to do. First, just FYI, create your entire workbook. So finalize everything before adding the password protection. Password protection is the last step that you want to do. And once you add the password into your filter, you won't be able to see anything unless you select the school. So doing the checks and so forth that you normally do on a workbook would be incredibly hard. So it's almost best if you just create the entire workbook, do all your checks, make sure everything's accurate, and then you would add your password on, and I can show you how to do that. So like I said before, you create an Excel file that I showed you that you save each school's password separately. I used a random password generator on a website that basically allows you to manipulate what you want to add in your password. So how many characters and so forth. And you can download as many passwords as you need into a CSV file, which makes it super easy. So you can just assign each school to a password, keep that all in an Excel file so that you have that. I always recommend to administrators, once they receive their password from me, that they copy and paste it into the little filter section so they don't type it in, because it's a complicated password and it changes every year. So I'm going to show you, let me get out of my presentation. I'm going to show you. Okay. So this is how you create a password. So you create a calculated field. This is basically the calculated field that I created. So you go here, create calculated field. It shows up here. And you basically, and I'll expand this for you. You basically say, if this school is, and you put their name, then this is the password. And you do that for all of your schools. Yes, it takes a while. But this way you ensure, and again, I just copy and paste it from that Excel. So I don't ever get the passwords incorrect. I just copy and paste it. And at the end, you put else and then a blank and click end and click OK. So this is what it'll look like without the password. It's taking a little while to load. There we go. And you're going to drag the password into the filters panel. And it's going to come up here. And you're going to go custom value list. And you're going to uncheck the box that says include all values when empty, because when it's empty, the password is empty, you want it to be blank. You don't want to show any data. And click OK. And as you can see, it will be blank. So when I go to my dashboard and I, again, enter in the password, then you'll be able to enter the password and it'll only show your school's data. So that's a pretty simple way of doing it. Again, make sure you finalize your entire workbook before you add this to it. If you're adding it to a dashboard, you just add enter password as a dashboard item as a filter. So right here. And as you can see, it's already added there, but you can just add password up here and put it wherever you want it. I usually try to put it in the same place so they always know that's the first thing you want to do. So I'm trying to teach all of the administrators that that's the first thing that you do if you don't see your data is you enter their password in the view. Okay. So the most important part, of course, is when you drop the password into the filters, you need to make sure it has custom value list and to uncheck the box, include all values when empty. And I always test it out at the end, make sure it's working okay. I'll just copy and paste the password in there to make sure it all works and that I don't see anybody else's data except the school's password that I entered in. So.
Awesome, Kim. Thank you so much for kind of diving into a topic that you don't often hear about. And so when Kim and I were discussing, the applicable and talking about, the risks that are involved, she's very open and transparent. Sometimes school districts just kind of have to come up with a solution that works for them as they grow in their data analytics journey. And for, Adams 12, this is part of their journey, and getting data into the hands of the end user was, their definite goal. And so this is where they are. And so you may not have those same, issues in their district, or you might have a peer who is kind of struggling with, I would love to use analytics, but this is my roadblock. Maybe help make that connection with Kim and team. So with that, we have a couple questions that are sitting out there in the Q&A. So Ryan asked, what is the process for requesting changes to the table of contents or that landing page for the individual reports? You had mentioned that you update those and kind of modify those. So can you just walk through just kind of the process for managing change requests?
Yeah, so most of my requests, I don't necessarily allow schools to manage those requests. We have EL coordinators that are in charge of specific schools. So they really talk with the schools. They're kind of my go-between. And if there's something that they really think is helpful that we'll see, so this last month, I think we have some schools that are considered a secondary enrollment that wanted to see their EL students. So typically we provide schools, their students as a primary school that's enrolled. We don't typically do a secondary school enrollment. But for those who have students that are in secondary enrollment, especially like our online school, I think it's very important for them to be able to view it. So I brought in secondary students as a separate field so they each all the secondary schools now have their own password. So that was kind of an example. The schools wanted that. They talked to their EL coordinator. The EL coordinator got back to me and say, hey, can we do this? And so I'd say, yes, we can update it in the next month's update, because if I were updating it more than that, it would get kind of crazy and hard to maintain. Also, I have a lot of conversations with our EL director. So she actually requests, hey, can we do this? Or hey, can we do that? She especially does that for the district version EL Tableau summary workbook. So they have a district version, and then of course the schools that's password protected. So oftentimes she wants to see certain things that she doesn't necessarily want schools to be able to look at, but she wants to kind of delve into certain pieces herself. So that's kind of the process that we go through. And I try to update it within the first week or two of each month. So, and then I send out an email once it's updated. So.
There we go. Kind of follow up with that one. There was a question that came through in the chat, but I think it might kind of tie in. What limitations are you confronted with around implementing? You kind of talked about the pros and cons, but what are the limitations that you just weren't able to overcome?
I think the limitations that we weren't able to overcome, I think it's just like the major limitation is the time suck. It just takes a lot of time. You have to update 2 separate workbooks, so they pretty much look the same, minus give or take some views that the district has that the schools don't. So that piece is still very cumbersome. It's still kind of there every month. It's not ideal. I mean, obviously Tableau server would be much easier, much slicker, and with better privacy, data privacy, but this is just kind of what we have to do. So.
And so is there so there was, I guess, a follow-up question, more specifically with the Tableau reader. So Tableau reader is a pretty close kind of one-to-one with that user experience. So what would be a limitation with using the reader?
So I think the main limitation with using the reader is making sure it's updated on people's computer all the time, which IT has taken care of. They push out updates for us when we ask. Another, probably the biggest one, is just the learning curve for administrators and how to use it. So having literally every administrator downloaded on any computer they wish to view this workbook, it's a pain. And I get lots of questions. So I've created kind of a user video, a how-to guide on how to download it, how once you've downloaded it, what it looks like. I bring it, up the workbook, and I show them literally step by step, how do I enter my password? How do I work through this? How do I use filters? All that stuff is in a kind of one-stop video, which has helped a lot. We also have some cheat sheets that are more like Google documents that we also share with administrators that have helped them kind of understand how to do it. And I often get phone calls where I just walk an administrator through it. It's a long process. We've gotten better as we've gotten more into it, and schools have started using it more, which is good. But yeah, I think that's the hardest part of the implementation process with Tableau Reader.
So I think just kind of adding a little commentary before we move on to Kevin's question is, in our role as consultants, when we come in and really help clients make decisions, you have that level of effort with, the time that you're spending doing all of these reworks and managing passwords and et cetera, and kind of taking your FTE hours involved in translating that to a $12 or a $15 a month license for online Tableau. And so just kind of helping navigate, like, when is there kind of a business case to justify your time spent in just converting that into a license? And so interesting conversations. I think everyone kind of starts that journey in trying to navigate that. And so I just, you just kind of have to kind of sit back and think about time spent and license. and compare those costs. So just a little extra commentary in there. So Kevin has a question. It says, what are the district's concerns about seeing each other's data? Sounds like you're doing a lot of work and having to deal with some of those restrictions.
I mean, for us, administrators in each school are not allowed to see other schools' data in Infinite Campus. So not seeing other schools' data is important, especially because we have a roster. If it was more aggregate data, they would be able to see, most of some of those tabs are not password protected because it's aggregate data. It's available on the CD website. It's posted everywhere. We don't worry too much about that. But for the current Yale student roster, it's just important to password protect that because it has specific student information that administrators at other schools obviously should not be able to see. Yes, it would be obviously a lot easier if schools were allowed to see all students, but that is not how data privacy works, and that's not how our district works, and I'm sure other districts are the same. But yes, it would be ideal if we had Tableau server and we could share out, everything in a safe, environment. But it is what it is, and we're working through it. And yep, that's kind of just how it is at this point. So.
All right. Well, I think that was the last of the questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A and also in the chat. So Kimberly, I thank you immensely. I know busy time of year, you got a lot going on, and for you to take the time out to kind of prepare the presentation and to spend the morning with us. We appreciate you. And if you have any additional questions for Kim, she had, shared that this is recorded. We'll be able to kind of connect you if you have any further questions for her going forward. But thank you, Kim. All right, so Holly, I'm not going to bring my PowerPoint that just has your name on it. I'm going to go ahead and just pass it off to you. Holly's going to talk about the data inventory and management workbook. She has a little presentation and some demo. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Holly.
Thanks. I'm proud of myself. I got my microphone turned back on successfully. I am Hollie Patterson. I'm a programmer analyst with Academy District 20, and I'm part of a 3-person team that's working with Tableau in the district. We do many other things, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. You do whatever's on your plate. So I guess just a brief overview for those who don't know, Academy 20 has about 25 to 26,000 students, 32, I believe it's 32 schools, if I remember correctly. And this is my 3rd year of working with Tableau and this user group. So I'm glad to be presenting again and maybe seeing some faces or hearing from you all. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So I am presenting from some different monitors, so I won't be looking directly at you. I apologize if that feels weird, but can you all see? Stephanie, can you see it? I'm making sure I don't see the ribbon. Oh, okay. So anyway, so we have an initiative that was trying to get every student grades 3 through 12 with 1-to-1 ratio for devices. And so this is how we use Tableau to manage that. I'll just talk a little bit about that project background, talk about some of our data prep, the obstacles, and provide a demo for you, and then talk about the outcomes and just a few resources that I used to help me along the way. So our stay-at-home orders began in March of 2020, and that's when the district had a need to address that device equity gap. And again, that was for all kiddos, 3rd through 12th grade was what we designated. We determined that kindergarten through 2nd grade would be maybe using, as they came back to school, using iPads and sharing those versus having dedicated PC devices for those other grade levels. A couple of factors that were in place or that impacted the project was that although District 20 did have a and does have an asset management system through our finance department. It's more about large assets. And so we really didn't have a smaller asset like inventory for computer devices management system, something that tracked everything from purchase to delivery and getting those into the kids' hands. We are a site-based district, so at the time, inventory of devices was managed at the sites, and that was an abrupt change due to this issue. We brought it all centralized at the district level, and that had its own pain points. We had an existing Tableau dashboard, a workbook, but the data sources that we were using, we discovered later on, weren't really telling us that whole picture. And then we also kind of began to understand that some practices that were in place because of that site-based management weren't really also kind of hindering that accurate inventory picture. So late spring and early summer of 2020, we adopted an asset management system called Destiny, Follett Destiny. If any of you are familiar with that product, it's more of a, or maybe the original focus was library management and check in, check out of library books, but also has a resource feature that allows high schools, for example, to check out band equipment or textbooks or calculators. And they do have an option for inventory of district devices. So that was used by a few schools, and we adopted it district-wide until we could really find a different solution that maybe had a better fit. One of the biggest drawbacks with that particular product is the asset reporting was almost non-existent. We couldn't get an actual report of devices and models and serial numbers and who had the device checked out. Those just two different areas in their database that we just couldn't bring those together. So we took the existing Tableau workbook and then overhauled it. And then we brought in some different data systems, and then it really significantly expanded the workbooks to support some data health issues and the inventory management and then replenishment decision making. Those systems, if you have anything similar to us, maybe if you have questions or how we implemented that, but feel free to ask. Active Directory is where we have some of our computer device information. It is also for, of course, users, but all of our deployments go through Active Directory for deploying computers to the network. Follett Destiny was, again, that asset management system. Infinite Campus is our student information system. So we did bring in some of the enrollment information and statistics into that. We use Workday as our HR and finance enterprise system. We've started to bring in some of the HR specific data to positions and titles. And then Workspace one was where Active Directory and one other that's not mentioned here is SCCM, but if you're a Windows shop, then you would know what that is, but it helps you manage your Windows devices, understanding when they're connected to the network and other statistics. Workspace one is for your Apple devices, formerly AirWatch. So kind of bringing all of those systems together into three main categories of data: the device data, the student data, and the HR data. We use SQL Server to transform and clean up our data. And then we bring that into Tableau. So this particular workbook had a split focus. Which was a big one, was data health, bringing, especially because of the fact that we were going from site-based and just a few schools using this, and they had their own conventions, to a district-wide use. We needed to reestablish some norms and create some where they didn't exist. And then the inventory and planning aspect of the project. I hear it often, and it kind of didn't sink in until a couple years into Tableau and working and designing. But beginning some of the reporting dashboards with those questions, we answered a lot of questions. This was an internal department workbook, so the review process or as change happened, we just jumped on it. That was kind of the expectation. it was at the whims of, our directors, and that's okay, because that was really the focus of this group effort. But we definitely, needed to determine the fields we were going to use, and determine if it mattered what funds were used when we purchased the devices, whether it was district owned or site owned devices. We needed to know how old devices really were. There was a practice in the district where folks we may be retiring something at one school, but another school wanted to pick those devices up and still use them for a different purpose. And instead of transferring the original purchase date, they put in the date that they acquired the device. So we really didn't get a good sense of how old some of those devices were. And then some of those definitions, like what does it mean to have a device checked out? Does it mean it's checked out to the classroom or to a person, versus whether it's just in use in a classroom or in use by a person temporarily? So we had a lot of data dictionary defining that we had to do. And then just really identifying some of those practices and conventions that we needed to establish district-wide to have good data health moving forward. On the inventory side, we had some issues with really just trying the scramble at the beginning of COVID, trying to get devices into kids' hands, and wherever they existed, no matter what school the student attended, if we had a surplus in one school, those devices were brought to the school that had the deficit. But we were still trying to track and maintain the original ownership, if quote unquote, even though it's really all district funds. But as we then began to plan for kids coming back to school, to get those devices back to the original buildings, we had that issue in well, I guess the beginning of the 2021 school year, and then again this year. We have a practice for purchasing certain devices. We have a teacher designated models and student designated models. But again, during this scramble, wherever we had a device and whatever model it was, if it fit the need at the time, it was given. And so we still kind of had to track whether students had teacher devices and vice versa. We also had to determine, based on our replenishment guidelines, the district likes to keep devices no older, 5 years or older is our rule. I'm sorry, 5 years or newer, not older. The devices may still live out there in buildings, but if they are going to be in teachers' hands or for dedicated use in student hands, we want to maintain that level of device integrity. Again, just where did the devices, how did they get purchased? We needed to keep track and be transparent about our CARES Act money and our grant money, and showing exactly how many of those devices are getting put out into the schools and what funding sources. And then again, just as we began this school year, another iteration of devices aging out, how many were damaged, things like that, and how many more do we need to purchase. There were several obstacles to getting this project rolled out. These were just a few to highlight. Again, one of the biggest ones was really requesting a custom data extract from the vendor, because they didn't have that data in their own canned reporting, or even their ability to give us the features in their custom reporting tools. We really just needed a huge data dump from them, and then we began working with that data on our own. And so we had to get that sent up or downloaded twice daily to a secure FTP site, just because the data was so important to us. As people were making changes, we needed to know that those changes were implemented. And so by noon, we had one at night and one at noon every day, twice daily, to update our data views. We wanted to make this automated, to bring that data in and just keep the data flowing. And so just building using some of our other tools with Microsoft Visual Studio to build a data package that converted their data down into our SQL Server tables, and to begin going from there. We've really spent a lot of time identifying and understanding what the data meant in one system versus another, and then where the holes were in some of those data health practices. Prepping everything in SQL for Tableau, and then on the end, one of the biggest obstacles for me was then to try to really make a streamlined presentation of all these these visualizations and the organization of the Tableau dashboards, as everything just kept changing so fast. This is an example of one of our early intro pages for this project. And we use images as navigation buttons here, with that aspect of, on the left side is the data health side, and the right side is the inventory side. So this particular piece here with the data cleanup, it was something that was kind of unusual. We did have, it was nice to have one-stop shop, was, again, as most folks like to have, the place to understand what needs to happen and then take some corrective action. And so with data health, we had some cases at the early onset, just 4 cases. It quickly grew, but I wanted folks to understand, what those cases were, why it mattered. We're not just making busy work for folks if we didn't have devices with serial numbers in certain systems, or devices without barcodes in others, and devices with the wrong naming convention in others. It all mattered, and we couldn't get accurate reporting without it. So then just defining for them what action should they take, so they don't really have to think too hard about it, as district technology technicians were the ones in the schools managing their own data, if you will. Then at the bottom was the navigation buttons to take them to those places to begin the data cleanup. As we grew, I kind of ran out of space, ran out of real estate, and it really became cumbersome to go keep using that navigation type of design. And it was just too many colors, which was also a bad design practice. So kind of scrapped that, because also, like on the other dashboards, you just run out of real estate room for all those buttons, and you have to keep updating all the dashboards with new buttons, or updating the order of the navigation. And in our district, we just like to keep it a clean view instead of allowing folks to see the tabs at the top. That was just some of the decisions that we've used and followed along with the district design practices, but it maybe was realizing quickly it was time for a change. So, that's where that focus for myself shifted, and I sort of just gave up on all those older design practices for dashboard navigation, and went with the story navigation that's built into Tableau. It's still one project. We have 2 storylines currently, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and if we needed to add more storylines, this was how I was going to manage it. So this has about 16 dashboards. It's one of the biggest ones we have in the district, and folks can navigate from a main menu to the specific focuses, whether it's data health or inventory and planning. And so I'm going to switch really quick to demo that for you a little bit deeper, and what that looked like. Whoops. There we go. So I did have to create a main sort of like landing page table of content dashboard. And then I just have navigation buttons that are taking us to the different storyboards or storylines. And that also allowed me to add that particular dashboard to the story so that we could toggle between the 2 storylines. And that took me a little while to figure out how I wanted to organize that. But then folks can either just click on the individual dashboard. They can use the scroll bar here, and it'll begin for them. And then just begin that journey. A couple features about these. I mean, most of these are crosstab dashboards. which when we're just trying to look at data and data cleanup, it was the easiest way to manage that. And in some cases where I tried to just make the most out of the real estate using some show hide containers to show opposite cases where we're missing serial numbers or IDs, different things as we moved on. There's not too much. I don't know how much I want to bore you all, but you know, some of the cases, they'd have to understand what's happening with the request, use that data health case action tab where it applies, and then take their corrective action. So this particular one has another show hide container that shows the status values that are approved or not approved. So, you know, it's just really all about the data health and integrity as we try to bring about district norms. Then if we switch the focus to the inventory and planning side, we begin to see some of the bar charts and stacked bar charts for folks by school. They can look at devices by manufacturer, device type, meaning whether or not it's a mobile device, a staff or student mobile device, the different models, the funding sources. We had established that we would be using for what is our responsibility as a district versus the responsibility that the school took on and had other funding. And so that's kind of the lens through which we're looking. Sometimes it's an inventory only lens, and sometimes it's a planning lens. We're just kind of blending those two cases into these particular dashboards. We do have the patron types and the status, but one of the parameters that we put across all of these inventory dashboards was that age device parameter, so that we could limit, depending on the year we're looking at, or if we are talking about inventory, we could switch this to 8-year-old devices or newer and get a different view of what our inventory looked like versus whether or not we wanted to talk about replenishment planning. And I know this is how many devices we have that are in good standing, and then compare that against how many kids we know are coming in through enrollment. The biggest request, I think, was to add some additional features so that folks could just take the detail of that data and bring it into Excel, download this data. We brought in some grade level data. DTTs could take this information and understand, for like device check-in, who had a device checked out. It's their report. They could check it off as students brought their devices back in. You would think an asset management system would have that, but it just didn't have it for the devices, which was such a bummer. We have a CIO version only. So many people were looking at this all the time and changing the filters. The CIO was really struggling with, just don't mess with my dashboard. And so it created a version for her with no filters. So everything is preset, but I did want to have a way to communicate what the presets were. And so that's another show hide container example. And that just made it simpler for them. And this is live data. So sometimes it does take a little bit to render. Nothing is necessarily student PII data, so we didn't have to worry about some of the permissions that Kim talked about. We do have that for some of our other dashboards, though, in D20. This is our students versus device counts by school, and just trying to make a simple, easy way for folks to see the number of students enrolled versus the number of devices that we have allocated. Trying to use a Viz and tooltip option here to see those specific model breakdowns there. The staff versus student devices is another good visualization to just understand, again, the total numbers of staff devices and total numbers of student devices that we have. And you can manipulate that again with the parameter or different statuses of whether or not they're all checked out or what's available for checkout. Think just those different site devices, and again, some detail. One of those questions that we had to answer was what happened to the devices that we were at one school and loaned out to another. And this is how we were tracking that device mobility. Just let us see if a device was checked out to a certain high school, it belonged to a certain high school, but then was checked out to a different school site, who had it. You know, this one in particular, we can see it's available, but the school hasn't returned it. Village High School hasn't returned it to Air Academy High School. And so what are the reasons why? You know, eventually that either needs to get back to the original high school, or you need to change it in our inventory system and Destiny to reflect the change of location. So kind of another data check, but more about where's the devices in inventory. We also had a case later on in the progress that we have a way to check what students who didn't have a device. So show me the students who have no device checked out. You know, as the flurry of handouts happened through the beginning of the school year, you know, maybe some kids just showed up late, or they couldn't come to the checkout device events, and so we still needed to get those devices into hands of students, or maybe they just opted to use their own device that particular year, and that's okay. So we just needed to know what those totals were. And then some of the practices with regards to like checkout status. There was a big practice for like checking out whole carts, like iPad carts or laptop carts, to a teacher. And when you're trying to determine replenishment and what is supposed to, what devices are aging out for teachers and, you know, and for students, it made it really hard to know. We really just need to know, we're only going to be responsible for the ones that are about district provided devices. And so we created this dashboard to allow the managers to say, show me the staff with more than one device, or all staff, you know, and then get a little bit more detail on that. Let me update this a little bit. My refresh isn't working, but this particular staff member has 3 devices. One is an iPad, which maybe we wouldn't necessarily, you know, care about so much as far as replenishment, but one of these 2 models might be one of the models that we were focusing on for trying to get something into teachers' hands. And how old is this device? So we could tell there's getting ready to age out, and so we may need to replace 1 or more of these devices. But why does the teacher have 3 devices? So those are the questions, you know, as we try to match money with need, you know, the amount of money we have to spend with the needs in the district and the true needs. That is and has been the continuing saga of some of those dashboards. So for our outcomes, you know, we really, the biggest goal was always about having accurate data, and we finally did get to that level of comfort where they could make a data-driven decision and take the risk and purchase certain number of devices and add a little bit of percentage perhaps to pad that to make sure we had enough. We ended up handing out over 16,000 devices this year in just a few days using, you know, leveraging this dashboard. A huge lift for the infrastructure services branch of our IT department. So, you know, that was just a phenomenal undertaking. The dashboards continue to highlight practices where folks stray from the conventions. For some reason, someone thinks it might be a better idea to name a device under a different convention, but then it drops off of our inventory. And so it's understanding and communicating, again, why we have those conventions, first of all, why it matters. You're messing up the data, and to just identify when it happens. Sometimes in the past, we had no insight into what folks were doing. It was just the Wild West out there. So again, we have the data all in one place for folks to take appropriate action. We have easier end of year intake and beginning of year handout processes because of it. And we definitely can accommodate now any additional requests more easily. It's so much easier to pop those new dashboards into the storyline almost seamlessly and just get those up and into the hands of the folks needing it. So I have a few resources that I'll share into the chat here. I'm just gonna, if I can find the chat, I might have to do it in a minute. I'm sorry, but so I'm part of another user group. The analytics user group is hosted by Annabelle Rincon and Sadale McCall. And so I'll provide the link to that. Sadale goes over that hidden content using showhide containers. He just has a really good presentation on that and easy to follow. So I liked that. And then the recording time on that of when he starts, about an hour and 16 minutes in. I also visited the information lab from the UK information lab and their Tableau creator learning path. They're free classes, and they offer them on a rotating basis all the time. And so even though I'd been through the Tableau version of some of the desktop creator training, sometimes you just need to hear it again or hear it differently. And so this was a great resource. Level of detail calculations especially always seem to stump me. So I learned a lot more and just different understanding of it. And then just that link for the create a story and how to do that in Tableau. Our use case is slightly different, where normally a story you're trying to guide someone to an end conclusion. And really all I was interested in the story features was that navigation toolbar and helping us organize. So just thanks for the opportunity. And you're always welcome to contact us. We have a tight-knit group here, so feel free.
Thank you, Holly. I found it refreshing to kind of hear about your different use case. I think often in the different, I know within our team here in Colorado, but in other presentations, I feel like we don't get to kind of this type of content. And so I appreciate kind of you willing to step outside of the typical box in that presentation and sharing how you're using Tableau in a very different way. And yes, sometimes crosstabs are not as flashy as some of those others, right? But the purpose is the data into the hands of the users and just kind of like cut to the chase, like just give me the list of people or the devices and etc. So, and I appreciate the design that you added, like the color palette, it was just very pleasing. And so kind of along that design lens, there's a question in here from Matthew. Would there ever be users that didn't know what the fields mean? So do you kind of provide data dictionaries, or how, and I'm going to expand just a little bit on his question, what is the kind of the training path to kind of upskill your users when you share this workbook with them?
Yeah, so our district technology technicians are the ones that would be managing the data in those fields in the 5 different systems, or I'm sorry, not necessarily all the systems, but at least probably 3 of them. And so we did roll out that training. We spent a lot of time discussing the reasons why the particular fields that we were going to be using for reporting, and then just providing like that data dictionary once the team at the district level came to consensus on how they were going to use the funding codes, and how they were going to use the status check-in checkout codes, and how they were going to use devices that were a teacher classification versus a student classification device. And we really then could also, because we brought it at the district level for centralized management, I was also involved in importing new devices. So we had a process for organizing and formatting that data when we brought it into Destiny, so that we could ensure those norms were being adhered to. But people can change the data after it gets in there, which was the frustrating part. So you know, it's never going to be clean 100%. There's always going to be data health issues with this until we maybe find a different system. But we spent a lot of time working with folks and trying to communicate.
Thank you. I'm just going to double check the chat. I don't see any other questions. You must have answered everyone's question as you navigated through the presentation. So with that, I think I just want to say thank you again, Holly. You put a lot of time into that presentation and preparing and helping share what D20 is doing with not only our team, but as it's recorded and it goes out to all K12 users across the state. So we appreciate you and volunteering or saying yes when I asked. And I just want you to know that I appreciate you.
Sure, thanks.
All right, I am going to go ahead and kind of wrap us up. We are going to end a little early, which I'm sure no one will find to be a problem in your busy schedules these days. So let me just kind of get my screens organized here. We are trying to be very intentional about supporting the K12 space throughout this school year. And so we have a series of events happening every month in some form or fashion. So I highly encourage you to sign up for the Tableau 2021 virtual conference. I know it's really hard. I fall into the trap myself with these webinars. You put them on your calendar and then other work kind of comes into play. So I know I'm personally trying to be very intentional this year about kind of holding that safe space for my learning. And so I would encourage you to do the same in that fashion. And then in December, someone or myself from the Plant Moran team will be hosting a K12 workshop. So more details to come in that space. I'm very focused on Tableau technical skills that are applicable to you all. January 26th, we will host our national K12 tug. And so if you're not part of that invite list, just reach out to me. February 2nd, this team will come back together. So I am requesting and soliciting for presentations. And again, I know we have friends joining us from outside of Colorado. So it says Colorado, but know that we have friends in other states. And then you'll see going forward, we have additional workshops that the plant team is hosting. And then we have our series of user groups. So if any of those dates, whether it's the Colorado or the national user groups that you would be interested in sharing some of the great things you're doing in your district, please reach out. You will receive a link to this recording, as well as a PDF of these kind of notes. You have access to links. And then if some of our presenters have access or PowerPoints and links they want to share, we'll include that as well. And so I just thank you for your time today, joining us, taking time out to really honor your growth and supporting your peers in the Tableau space. So I thank you all, and I don't see any kind of outstanding questions. So I'm going to go ahead and close this meeting. And next time we regroup will be Tableau Conference 2021. So thanks to you all.